Welcome to the Kusa Cast, where we interview some of the most influential people in tourism from around the world. My name is Graham Watson, and I'm the founder of Kusa Global. The word Kusa means a new dawn, and in 2023, we want to find out just how our guests are working towards that new dawn. Join us and subscribe to future episodes as we hope to inspire you with stories of strength and resilience in the tourism industry. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Kusa Cast. Today, I am talking to Monika Iuel, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Wesgro. Monika and I have known each other for many years. We've come across each other in various parts of the world at trade events. Monika has been in the industry since the mid-90s and worked her way up in various different positions. So welcome, Monika.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks very much. Just to be clear, I'm the Chief Destination Marketing Officer at Wesgro. So just we have a Chief Communications and Marketing Officer sitting here as well, so we don't want to be confused.
All right, perfect.
I look after all things tourism at Wesgro.
Perfect. Thanks for clearing that up, Monika. So just while we kick off, just tell the listeners a bit more about yourself and your background, how you got into tourism, just a brief overview of your career so far.
As you've already said, I've been in tourism since the mid-90s, so I don't know how brief I'm capable of being after a 30-year history. But I guess maybe to start from the top, I was living in Berlin in the mid-90s, and came across a tour operator that was specializing in Southern Africa and Australia and New Zealand called Jetstream. And I actually used them to book my holiday back to South Africa to visit my folks. And on one of the occasions when I went in there to book, I was chatting to the general manager, and she said to me, there's an opening in the team for an apprentice. And in Germany, you do blended learning. So you do school and practical work simultaneously. So after 2.5 years, I had a tourism qualification and I had 2.5 years of work experience. So it was a real sort of winner. It's just as an aside that I do hope that we in this country also contemplate at some point that there are some technical jobs that you don't have to go to varsity for. If you can get practical on the job experience whilst also acquiring the theory at the same time, I think that's a great solution, particularly for tourism. Anyway, sidebar. The journey then took me back to South Africa because I was a German speaking tourism professional. And obviously back in the 90s, we were benefiting from that Madiba dividend. We were all booming in terms of tourism for the first time ever. So I came back to South Africa then, one, because I wanted to come back home, and two, because I wanted to see how well I could do in that industry in Southern Africa. And then really just sort of spent the first 15 years of my career in the private sector, culminating in 13 years at Tourvest Destination Management, where my last role was Sales and Marketing Director for what was then called Your Africa, which has now been amalgamated into Sense of Africa. And then I left Tourvest to go to South African tourism. So I went into the public sector for 4 years and did international marketing. I looked after, in the ultimate 2 years there, looked after the 11 country offices that SA Tourism then had off the African continent, which made for an interesting work day, because when you woke up in the morning, the Australians were about to go home. And when you wanted to go home in the afternoon, the North Americans and the Brazilians were just warming up. So it was always fun.
Yeah, we've all deal with that in this business. Yeah.
100%. Office hours. What is that? Anyway, but it was a fantastic learning experience for me. I was very lucky to be able to also travel to all of these fantastic destinations and source markets for us. And it really sort of put me on a completely different trajectory in terms of my career. And then the opportunity back in the private sector opened up to become CEO of Private Safaris here in Cape Town, which is a DMC that looks after Southern Africa with an office in Cape Town and another one in Windhoek. And so I ran Private Safaris for 5 years. And then in the middle of the pandemic, Tim Harris came to me, who was then the CEO of Wesgro, and said to me, this tourism recovery work that you've been doing together with Satsa and Natalia and Cindy Sheedy Walker and Rob Moore and all of those guys, I want you to please come and help this tourism industry in the Western Cape recover from this pandemic. And it took him a long time because I really was very loyal and very emotionally attached to my team at Private Safaris, but he did manage to get it right. And so in 2021, early 2021, I moved from the private sector back into quasi public sector. Wesgro is the official tourism, trade and investment promotion agency for the Western Cape, which means that the lion's share of our funding comes from the Western Cape government as well as the city of Cape Town. But we are by design, we have a Wesgro Act in the province, and by design we are built to be business facing and have the unique opportunity to provide a linkage between government and private sector. So our board, as an example, is all pulled in from the private sector, and they're an independent board, which makes it makes us very agile and makes us very responsive to business.
Wow, that's quite an impressive CV, Joel, that you have there. I mean, in 30 years, what do you think? Obviously, it's been a roller coaster. I think anyone who's been in any industry for that long, there's ups and downs. What do you think was one thing? Does anything stick out in your mind that you didn't expect or came as a surprise to you, that kind of put you on a different path or kept you on the same path? Just something that you didn't expect to happen that was for the positive.
Sure. I think the first major sort of milestone, certainly for me professionally, but I think also for the destination, was the FIFA World Cup in 2010. Oh. I think that completely changed the game for the destination. I mean, I was lucky enough to be working at Tourvest at the time, and they obviously had a massive operation running through the World Cup. I mean, they had sponsor contracts from across the world, BP, Coca-Cola. They had the Dutch soccer team fans and operations that they were running logistics for. I mean, my husband Chris was stadium manager for the Gauteng stadium. So he spent his day getting coaches parking at Soccer City and in Pretoria and in Joburg. And I spent the mornings dispatching drivers and buses to the various locations to try and get people moved around. So it was just, for myself, it was a very epic experience and really a demonstration of, the old Nelson Mandela adage of you always believe it's impossible until it's done. When we heard Martin Wies talking about the World Cup before it happened, we all thought he was smoking something really good. And then when we pulled it off, it was just incredible, And I think, it also did something for the nation, and it did something for the destination. I think that for years after that, the destination still benefited from having been beamed into households across the world and really have some sense of familiarity with our source markets having been built around the destination and debunked a lot of those safety and security myths and bad reputation that we have earned for some reason. So that's the positive surprise. If I may talk about a negative surprise for a minute, if that's allowed. So the big negative surprise that I got was in the midst of this pandemic when we were doing all that red list lobbying. It was just deeply surprising to me how the first world had this real, I call it Afro-pessimism. So there was this real sense that we got throughout the lobbying process, and I don't want to single out any particular country and any particular diplomatic corps or scientist group or whatever, but literally across the first world, there was this constant sense that we would get based on the decisions that were being made, that they truly felt like nothing good could possibly come from us. There was this, it's impossible that our data is right. It's impossible that we could have just found something first that perhaps is already everywhere in the world. It's impossible that our health and safety protocols are stringent enough for their tourists to be safe when they come here. It was such a prevailing and such a prevalent bias, that I had, it was illuminating in that it made me understand that our reputation management challenge is far greater than we ever expected. It's not actually about the bad media reports. It's about the fact that it confirms a negative bias that they already have. And so that was a negative surprise to me to realize that even after all these years and after all this time, and even with so many people being pro South Africa and being pro Africa, there's still this real patronizing attitude in some of the institutions across the world that sort of feel that, like I said, nothing but good could possibly come from here,
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting term, Afro-pessimism. It's, I mean, I think that kind of just sums it up. I think most of us in the tourism industry do feel that, it seems that major issues can happen in another part of the world, but the moment a similar or even lesser issue happens in Africa, then there's travel bans and all that kind of stuff. So that's a legacy problem that we hope we can all work towards to change that. I think as things like this, as podcasts, as social media gets even more better and sort of omnipresent in the world, let's hope that there's a lot that can be done to debunk those myths. So what in the past, like 3 years, what would you say the pandemic taught you professionally, personally, and what do you think the biggest challenge to the industry was? I mean, of course, the job losses, but do you think there's, what do you, does anything stand out for you as like the one of the biggest challenges that the industry faced during that time?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge that the industry has always faced, and it was certainly one of the cornerstones of our sort of lobbying efforts in the pandemic, we've always been seen as fluffy and non-essential, to use the word out of the COVID pandemic playbook. Non-essential travel was not allowed, and that's obviously you're viewing an entire industry through the lens of the consumer and not through the lens of the industry. Because non-essential for whom?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've always labored under that. I do think that one of the unexpected upsides, I'm just speaking from the Western Cape angle now, but one of the unexpected upsides is that the entire country painfully felt what tourism actually does for the economy.
Yeah.
When they didn't have
it. What are the stats now? It's a huge proportion, isn't it? I don't know if we know off the top of our heads, but
it's so difficult to track, Graham. I think that once you move away from the direct contribution, so if you're not counting direct industry brands and direct industry forex and direct industry employment, the thing is that tourism is an apex industry. And you saw it here in Cape Town. I mean, when we didn't have tourists here, there were no flower vendors on St. George's Mall.
Yeah.
When we didn't have international tourists here, then Test Kitchen closed.
Yeah, there's so many knock-on effects. Taxis, everything. Restaurants.
100%.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. So, and I think that I would challenge anyone to be able to get their arms around what tourism actually does, which economies in a place it actually stimulates, because it is just so broad. It's like, so as an example, if a hotel is operational and draws its staff from a particular part of the city, the lady sitting at the corner selling vet cook will be able to benefit from the times when those guys go to work. When that hotel's closed, the lady with the vet cook doesn't make a trade. Who measures that stuff? I think it's incredibly difficult, but I think that subjectively, important people and decision makers, certainly in this province, and I think also in the country, have really firsthand experienced what it does to an economy when you do not have a robust tourism industry. And so I think that's been an unexpected, almost positive, that we don't have to fight as hard anymore to make sure that people understand that we're important. I think going into the pandemic was much harder than it is now.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's hope so. There does seem to be, there does, whether it's, I think it's a psychological thing, but I think 2023, the new year, there does seem to be a far more positive upswing. I think, as I've said to so many people, it will hopefully be the first year since 2018 almost, where there has been unrestricted travel. It's let's hope it all carries through. I think a lot of people are pinning their kind of businesses on what happens this year. So so let's look.
But I mean, we mustn't ignore the signs that are out there in terms of how we now need to be responsive as an industry. I think that the the consumers that we, by and large, derive our income from have been changed quite substantially by the pandemic. And I think, any business that isn't able to respond in some way to the requirement around sustainability for both people and planet, products that aren't able to respond in some way to people that just really want to unplug. I think there's trends that are happening globally now in terms of what the consumer is looking for that we have to respond to as an industry and as a destination, particularly because South Africa in totality, but certainly the Western Cape Town and the Western Cape in particular, we're an end destination and we're really far. It's a lot of carbon emissions. There's a lot of concerns around all that sort of stuff. So we have to make sure that we can demonstrate that coming to our destination does good.
Yeah.
So that's a really key consideration.
Do you think that if I had to ask you what do you think still needs to change in order for the industry to really get a boost and go forward? Do you think it's focusing on that sustainable tourism? What's the one thing that you think we've all done well to get to this point, but we just need something a bit extra? What do you think that is?
Honestly, I think that we haven't done enough, and I'm including myself in this. I don't think we've done enough to raise the game of the smaller experience operators and the smaller, the SME layer of the industry, because I think that's where the secret sauce is now. People want authenticity. They don't want prefabricated bubble holidays. They want to really immerse. They want to get away from it all. They want a real, true, authentic local experience, which is what these small operators and these small guest houses and things can offer, And I think that what we haven't done sufficiently, maybe because we all just get so eye-rolly when it becomes a political agenda, but I don't think that we as an industry have managed sufficiently to make that layer of product market ready. I don't think that we found the right ways to give these people market access. And I don't think that we've sufficiently packaged those experiences to make sure that, it becomes something that the international traveler appreciates and finds desirable.
Yeah, and there's so many products out there, and there's a lot of good work going on to help the SMEs. But as that was the answer to the question. That still needs to change. We need to all focus on helping.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think that the point is a different one, right? It's not about helping them. It's not about helping them. It's about they are the future. They are what the consumer is looking for. We need to find a way to include them in the ecosystem, because otherwise we're going to miss a trick.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. That'll be one of the key takeaways, I think, from our discussion. So just on you personally. So let's talk about Monika Iuel. What do you think your most productive time of day is for you personally?
It depends on for what. So I do my best thinking in the mornings, and I do my best admin in the afternoon. So I'm more slow, but somehow considered in the mornings, and then more efficient and quick in the afternoons.
Interesting.
So I tend to try and parcel my day like that if I can.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to get the alarm clock to go off earlier and earlier, but darn that snooze button. It's always there. No, they need to take the snooze button away. I think it'll help humanity quite a lot.
100%.
What is there's been a lot of software development coming up over the last 3 years. A lot of, our platform that we're on now has taken off. Has there any sort of productivity tool that you use now that you weren't using before, and how has it made your life a bit easier?
So I'm going to say something that's going to be deeply unpopular, maybe even with you, but I use the off button.
The off button?
The off button. That's always been there.
Oh, yeah.
So I've just finished reading a book. I'm not earning any royalties from these guys, but it's called Stolen Focus.
Mm-hmm.
By a gentleman by the name of Johan Hari, whom I'm a big fan of. And he's written this book, which I completely devoured over Christmas. And it really is about, if you really want to deeply focus on something, if you really deeply want to engage with a subject, or you want to do something really complicated, write a strategy document or whatever it is, there's every single time you get a WhatsApp, every single time your email goes sploying whilst you're in the middle of that, it's going to take you 20 minutes to get back that level of depth of focus. So if I'm doing something that's really important or really urgent or requires a deep amount of thinking, I switch everything else off.
Mm. Yeah,
that's the only way.
That is the, yeah, I mean,
that's a productivity tool, let me tell you.
The off button. No, it's great. You do need to focus. And I think everybody just nowadays expects instant answers all the time. But if you're in the middle, they have to understand that in order for you to respond to them correctly, you need to focus on the task at hand for them. And, you may be working on something else for somebody else, and they just need to wait their turn, I suppose. And that's what the off button does.
No, yeah. Also, sometimes, let's be honest, the desire to respond is ours. It's not the expectation. If you respond a couple of hours later, most people don't. I mean, I was off the grid for 4 days now over Christmas. No cell phone reception, no Wi-Fi, nothing. And when I came back to civilization, my WhatsApp box exploded. But there was nothing in there that me not responding had caused a calamity, or, it's us that feel this desire to constantly respond to things. And our ability to absorb information and our ability to compute and think hasn't sped up, even though the amount of information that's out there now has.
Yeah.
And so you create this low grade anxiety if you constantly feel like you have to read this news headline and that WhatsApp and this Facebook post and that tweet. It's crazy. I'm telling you, the off button. It's a magic. It's a best invention ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a new travel trend, which is the digital detox. So
100%.
It's finding ways to completely switch off. It's tough, I think, for a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs like myself. You always feel like you have to be on top of everything, but it's that's. I mean,
if you think back to before the internet, the way that you remained informed is that you bought the newspaper in the morning. And then you got your newspaper in the morning and you read it from cover to cover, and then you put it away, and then you were fine until you got the news again the next morning. And if you're really burning to hear about something in between, you put on the radio and you waited until it was the hour, and then you could get the news.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it's interesting because I've spoken to a lot of people about productivity tools, and you are unique in saying the off button. So that's definitely something I will try. Definitely something I will try.
Just allocate time for things. So, I mean, that's what been the newspaper example has been great for me, because now in the mornings when I come, have my cup of coffee, then I gun up all the different news portals and I read all the things that are interesting to me. And then I close it off, and then I don't have any news notifications on my phone, because I know there's people around me that'll let me know if there's anything going on. Yeah. And then I can get on with my day.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think definitely a balance, and I think it's important. I think a lot of people, as I think you kind of said, it's the stress that people feel is self-inflicted in a lot of ways. So.
And it doesn't make you more productive just because everything is on. Doesn't make you more productive. Then you're just the headless chicken.
Exactly, running around in circles but accomplishing nothing. Yeah. So. Yes. Interesting. So the industry's been through a lot. The whole planet's been through a lot in the last 3 years, particularly with remote working as one example. What do you think will be the main and kind of lasting change that happened to the industry? What do you think will be the one thing that carries forward now without question, without going back to the way it was in the tourism industry?
Look, I would like to say that the world has hopefully learned that travel bans have no impact on a pandemic. I'd like to think that the world has learned that, and then that will benefit the industry sustainably and into the future, so that the next time something like this happens, and I believe that this is, it's been coming for a while, and my understanding is that there's, potentially more of these kinds of things that are going to happen in the future. And so I'm hopeful that the industry will not be as heavily hit in the future, and that you allow travelers to make up their own minds on whether they want to take a risk or not.
Yeah.
So that would be my hope. But I don't know how realistic that is. It's such a difficult question to answer. I saw it on the list that you sent me and I was thinking about it, and it's so difficult to say. I mean, when we were in the middle of the pandemic, I could have sworn that, travelers, certainly for a period of time in like the UK, would want to continue booking with atoll bonded agents, because then they knew that their money was safe and that they would, at least in the short term, not be booking through OTAs, because, your money's not secure there. The cancellation policies were quite rough during the pandemic. And that people clearly have substantially shorter memories than I had given them credit for, because it does seem as if, certainly subjectively from what I'm hearing at the moment, it does seem as if that was a short-lived situation with the traditional channel, and that we're actually back to where we were before the pandemic, which is that people just book, they consume things, whether it's shoes or holidays, they consume it where they like to consume it, regardless of the risk. So that's kind of changed. I think, having been around for 3 decades almost already, I'm going to say that I think, all things being equal, I don't think that things will have changed substantially. I don't think that the pandemic will have changed things substantially. I think the thing that has changed the world substantially is how the Gen Zs and the new Gen Alphas think, and how they see the world and how they consume the world. I think that will substantially impact destinations and the tourism industries in them into the future, because they just see the world so differently, and they expect such different things from their holidays and what even constitutes fun. And so I think that's the thing to watch. If we talk about a change in the industry that's going to be long lived, I think our new consumer, our new traveler, and how they think and how they operate, where they consume their information and what they even regard as information, and how they exchange information, and what word of mouth looks like, and all of those sorts of things, that's going to change forever. The more and more these guys get the purchasing power, the more and more they are the ones that make the decisions of where holidays are going, the more destinations are going to have to keep up.
Yeah. I think obviously cancellation terms, and hopefully they've all become a bit more lenient, and I think we learned that lesson as well. So let's hope that's one of the lasting things. So what's happening at Wesgro now? What exciting project is Wesgro working on? I see Cape Town is booming with a whole bunch of new airlift coming in, especially from the US.
We've brought 4 new destinations on stream for direct international airlift last year, or late last year. Of 3 of them are US destinations, which is very exciting. And Virgin is finally back. After a stop-start, where they're finally here, which is fantastic. The Cruise Cape Town initiative has done incredibly well. There's going to be, I think, in total, once the season's done, I think there'll be 4 or 5 different occasions where we'll have 3 cruise liners simultaneously in the Cape Town cruise terminal, which will be, there's already been 2, so we've already trialed it, and the guys at the port did incredibly well. So I think all signs are showing that, certainly for Cape Town and the Western Cape, we can now talk about growth and no longer about recovery in 2023. So I think that's very exciting. I think that we take that mandate very seriously, and I think that we're in the process of doing, our financial year runs from April to March. So at the end of our current fiscal cycle, busy doing the planning for the next fiscal cycle. And we want to achieve breakout growth in the province, and the DMO at Wesgro wants to contribute its piece to that. And so we are, completely rethinking how we work in the DMO and really sort of being bold, and making sure that we do an integrated destination effort going forward. Go after the markets that make sense. Be research driven in terms of where our volume markets are and where our value markets are and what the distinction between the two is. And making sure that we understand the job creation element of those markets and pursuing those markets that are at the tip of the job creation pyramid rather than, the ones where there isn't perhaps such a great opportunity for us. And then, as we said earlier in the podcast, just getting better at making sure that we bring the entire tourism ecosystem along, in particular, the hidden gems and the really cool, authentic stuff that's happening in the province out there that we really want the industry and the consumer in the world to know about, because that's the stuff that makes us unique.
Yeah, well, that's good, really, really good to know. Wesgro is a great institution, and yeah, it seems to be going from strength to strength, particularly with flights and the different things to do in the Western Cape. So as we come into land on the podcast, there's obviously a lot of people trying to get into tourism, trying to rebuild their businesses, and I'm glad you said that people are talking about growth rather than recovery. We've kind of crossed that into that now. What do you think someone who's wanting to get into the industry, what advice would you give, that sort of motivation to succeed? We probably want to say run for the hills, but we won't do that.
No, we don't say that.
No, we don't say that. So yeah, for someone who's just starting out with their own business or their own idea, I've met a lot of people, particularly at that event in Africa Tourism Leadership that we were both at in Botswana. There were a lot of young entrepreneurs there that approached me after the panel discussion and wanted to pick my brain. A lot of interesting things. What advice would you give them how to stick it out? Because it's tough in the first few years with a new idea.
So the thing that, Graham, you perhaps underestimate, and it is my biggest piece of advice to anyone that wants to start out in the tourism industry, is travel. Just be a tourist yourself. If your source markets are international, go there. If your source markets are domestic, travel domestically. But you cannot have a deep understanding of this thing this industry that you're trying to succeed in if you yourself have not traveled. It's for me one of the undervalued cornerstones of a successful consultant in a DMC or a successful entrepreneur that wants to attract international tourists, because if you're always going to work from your own idea out rather than market in, you might miss it. You might think you've got a great idea, but you're not understanding what the market is looking for that you're in. So my biggest advice to everyone is always wherever you can and to whatever budget you have the ability to do, go out there and be a tourist as well. Experience what the reality of your source market is. Experience what the reality is of traveling. If you're in hospitality, you have to have slept in hotels. Otherwise, how can you work in a hotel if you've never slept in one? Yeah. How do you understand how it works if you've not slept in one? And so those are the things we at Wesgro try to facilitate that sort of thing wherever we can together with our other JAMS partners. But yeah, so that's my biggest advice. My biggest advice is, and that's also why I got into the industry, is because I enjoyed traveling myself so much that's why I thought it was a cool industry, is because I thought traveling was fun. So let me get involved in that side of things. So that for me is, but that aside, I think just as words of encouragement, it is still the coolest industry around, man. Even if we got put in the naughty corner over COVID, it really is the coolest industry where you can create incredible connections with complete strangers and you can change their lives.
Yeah. No.
I mean, what other industry can say that?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's we underestimate, even at we both started out as consultants, where even just the idea or the property you choose for a family, that creates lasting memories for somebody. And
100%.
some child in the world will remember that holiday with their family for the rest of her life. And then you had a hand in that. You're creating, I know it's cliche and everybody uses it, but you do create people's future memories, and it is a fantastic situation to be in, and I think that's why we all stuck it out as we did. It does. I know there's that group, but it does get in your blood, old tourism. And so, how would a business get in touch with Wesgro? What's the website address, and where?
So it's very simple. So it's wesgro.co.za. So there's no T in Wesgro. There's Wesgro.
Wesgro.co.za.
And it's GRO, not GROW. Yeah, wesgro.co.za. It's a fairly transparent website. All of our contact details are on there. But if someone wants to get hold of me individually, my email address is Monika with a K at wesgro.co.za.
MONIKA at Wesgro. Okay, perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Monika. Thanks for joining us in our infant podcast. And let's hope it's.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem, and let's hope that we can. We'll chat again in a year or so and see how things are going.
Exactly. Cool.
Okay. Thanks so much, Monika.
Thanks, Graham. Bye.
Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation, then please subscribe, leave us a great review, and even check out our Patreon page. Until next time, I'm Graham Watson, and thanks for listening to the Kusa Cast.